The FCC wants to know if you think trans and non-binary characters in television and streaming programs should come with a warning label. And that is a conversation that we've had in this country before. Let's talk about it. Welcome back to Yesterqueers. My name's Amanda, and I'm a public historian of queer history. Before we get into the history, let me put the important information right here at the top. This is where you can go to tell the FCC that the existence of trans characters is not a mature topic about which parents need to be warned. All comments must be submitted by this Friday, May 22nd. Okay, back to the history. I've talked about the Hays Code before, most recently in one of the heated rivalry videos that I did in December. But the brief overview is that in the 1930s, fearing that the government was going to start censoring films, movie studios decided to censor themselves and voluntarily adopted something called the Motion Picture Production Code, nicknamed the Hays Code because this guy, William H. Hays, was the president of the organization that was tasked with enforcing the code, the Motion Picture Producers and Distributors of America. This organization still exists. It's now simply called the Motion Picture Association, and it's responsible for rating films. When we talk about the code, we tend to talk about the restrictions that it placed on everything from how alcohol could be shown on screen to which parts of a woman's body could be uncovered, or about the fact that the code prevented films from showing anything perverse or deviant unless the characters exhibiting those traits got their comeuppance, usually by dying. This is the root of the modern bury your gays trope and the reason that tragedy often features prominently in queer stories on screen. But what we don't talk about enough is the fact that the code was put in place because, quote, the moral importance of entertainment is something which has been universally recognized. It enters intimately into the lives of men and women and affects them closely. It occupies their minds and affections during leisure hours and ultimately touches the whole of their lives. A man may be judged by his standard of entertainment as easily as by the standard of his work. So correct entertainment raises the whole standard of a nation. Wrong entertainment lowers the whole living conditions and moral ideals of the human race. The Hays Code was the infrastructure by which the power of movies was used to enforce a straight, white, cis, Christian ideal of society, an ideal that was exported from the United States to the rest of the world. In 1936, Liberty magazine described Joseph Breen, the Catholic layman who was head of the Production Code Administration and Hays's right hand, as a stocky, ruddy, pleasant man of 46 who probably has more influence in standardizing world thinking than Mussolini, Hitler, or Stalin, possibly more than the Pope. And that wasn't hyperbole. Breen and his handful of staff members reviewed every single part of every single film produced in Hollywood, often multiple times, to ensure that they were code compliant. In 1935 alone, the PCA reviewed 5,385 scripts, of which only 519 made it on screen. Breen and the PCA not only had the power to prevent scripts from being produced and finished films from being distributed, he also had the power to change costumes, sets, musical lyrics, promotional images. Everything had to go across Breen's desk, and the fine for a code violation was $25,000 per violation, about $600,000 in today's dollars. The studio heads and politicians, Hays was a Republican operative before heading up the MPPDA, knew exactly what kind of world they wanted to portray on screen so they could help bring it to life off screen, and they were successful in a lot of ways. The Hays Code was in place for 34 years, from 1934 until it was replaced in 1968 by the rating system that we still use today. Just think about how much of what we consider to be foundational American culture originated on movie screens and later television screens in that period. And think about how many of the architects of our modern pop culture grew up watching code-compliant stories on screen. Steven Spielberg was 22 when the Motion Picture Production Code was repealed. The rating system applied to movies in the post-code era, but not to television shows. The requirement for program ratings was part of the massive Telecommunications Act of 1996, and the goal was to give parents more control over what their children watched, because Congress found that television programming, quote, influences children's perceptions of the values and behavior that are common and acceptable in society. As movie studios did in the 1930s, the television industry decided that it would rather create a rating system for itself than be subject to one created by Congress, and that's what we've been using ever since. Republican politicians and conservative activists do not want children to believe that queer and trans people are a common or acceptable part of society. They want to reinforce the lie that the mere existence of queer people is deviant and inappropriate, a mature topic from which children need to be protected. And that belief has real-life consequences for the entire LGBTQ+ community, many of which are already playing out. Please take 5 minutes right now to tell the FCC that LGBTQ+ stories do not need a warning label. That's it for today.